Hello everyone, my name is Nitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at BT13, and BT13 offers us lots of new and powerful tools to be able to build some new and existing decks. And today's deck I'm going to be taking a look at is going to be a brand new iteration on a deck that we just got in EX4, which was the Ravemon deck, and we have the burst mode to further increase his overall output, along with a brand new evolutionary line to try to best support this new burst mode gameplay. So Bandai, as usual, when it comes to the release of a new set, they like to have a couple of base builds for you to take a look at, along with some good descriptors on how to best get started with the deck. So if you wanted to, you could take a look at what they think about the deck as far as some of the staples, recommended cards, and their own base deck composition. And then on top of that, they have their own little deck strategy and write-up, but as far as what the deck actually is trying to do, you're just trying to set up your main Digimon, have a whole bunch of on-delete effects go off when your Digimon gets deleted by its own card effect, bring back that Ravemon to be able to set up a burst mode play, and then utilize burst mode to try to control the opponent's hand and security all at the same time. But that's just their interpretation of the deck, and this is my interpretation of the deck. So starting off with the Digitama, you don't necessarily have to run 5 Digitamas if you don't want to. I'm running 5 just because I could, and DemiMeramon being the 5th egg is pretty decent just because we're trying to take advantage of all of the on-delete abilities we could stack up with our Digimon, and DemiMeramon is just one of the better ones, allowing us to have some good cycling. But most of the time when we're going to be utilizing our on-delete effects, ideally it's going to be on our high stage Digimon, so we would rather go for the efficiency rather than the extra card draw, just because of when we're actually expecting to utilize this ability. Which is why I'm going to be running for the main Digitama 4 copies of Pinamon, just because its on-delete ability that we're gaining allows us to be able to gain 1 memory. This is a little bit more specific on how we're getting the on-delete ability off, but if we're trying to trigger ourselves, then it should be no problem having easy access at that extra memory. Next, on to the rookies, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Tsukaimon. So even though Tsukaimon isn't an avian or a bird, because we are leaning into some of those synergies as well, just because a lot of the Falcomon line is birds and avians. But regardless of that synergy, we're mostly going to be utilizing Tsukaimon for its inheritable ability of another on-delete effect we could take advantage of to be able to have extra memory generation, except this is better than Pinamon's because it's not asking us to specifically have the Digimon be deleted by a card effect in order to gain this ability. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Falcomon. So this is the BT13 Falcomon, and it's a really decent card to be able to take advantage of its on-play ability to give one of our Digimon retaliation, so that way we could have some alternative forms of removal that way. Then its on-delete ability is the big upside on what we're trying to actually use for this card, on top of the Falcomon name, because its on-delete ability, as long as we deleted it again by a card effect, then the opponent trashes 1 card from their hand to further incentivize this hand control style of gameplay. And then the last rookie of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Falcomon. So this is the EX4 version of Falcomon, and it has that same on-delete ability as what we just saw with the BT13 Falcomon having some extra forms of hand control, on top of the fact that we want the consistency on certain abilities. Then the big draw for this card is it's also going to be the deck's dedicated digging or searching tool, looking for our Ravemon, other birds and avians in the color purple, and our Keenan Tamer more specifically. Next, on to the champions, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Devidramon. So Devidramon is in here again for very similar reasons why we're running Tsukaimon, just as an extra level 4 that we want for its inheritable ability to use generically to, like Tsukaimon, be able to help us gain some extra memory when our Digimon gets deleted. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Peckmon. So this is the BT13 version of Peckmon. This Digimon is a blocker, so that way we have some forms of defense in the deck, on top of the fact that it has an on-delete ability that we're already familiar with because we've seen it with our Falcomons, allowing us to have even more levels of hand control for when our Digimon gets deleted by card effects. And then the last champion of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Peckmon. So this is the EX4 version of Peckmon, and this is a really important card for the deck because its when Digivolving ability allows us to be able to set up our Tamer if we don't already have one on the field. Then on top of that, its on-delete ability, again, is just more consistency on this ability to try to control the opponent's hand and rip their hand apart when our Digimon gets deleted. When it comes to the ultimates, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Crowmon. So this is the BT13 version of Crowmon, and this is really strong for when we're trying to get up into our Ravemon because its when attacking ability, as long as we have a Tamer in play, allows us to Digivolve into a Ravemon from our trash for its Digivolution cost, having alternative ways to be able to get up into our level 6 Digimon. Then its on-delete ability is also really good for the deck, just because when it's deleted outside of battle, we get to play a level 4 or lower purple Digimon from our trash for free, so that way we could try to set up a blocker or utilize our digger, or just have the extra body just to have the extra body. And then the last ultimate of the deck is going to be 4 copies of the EX4 version of Crowmon. So this has a very similar style of ability to the BT13 Crowmon, where mid-attack it's allowing us to be able to Digivolve into our Ravemon. The Ravemon that we're Digivolving has to be coming from our hand, but regardless, just being able to swing Digivolve mid-attack allows us to be able to have lots of decent combo plays and setups on making sure we could best utilize our level 6s. And then on top of that, it has a nice on-delete ability that's allowing us to be able to have some extra forms of control by deleting one of the opponent's level 5 or lower Digimon. As far as the level 6s go, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Ravemon. So this is the BT13 version of Ravemon, and this is going to be the supporting level 6 of the deck for when we don't have our main level 6. So what this card is doing is it's still pretty decent and synergistic with the deck, not only just because it's a Ravemon, but because its ability at the end of our turn allows us to be able to delete this Digimon, trigger all of our on-delete abilities, as long as we have a Digivolution source in them with Bird or Avian in its traits, and then at the end of the opponent's turn, we get to play 1 Ravemon from our trash for free, allowing us to have a sticky body and be able to hide itself, so that way when it comes back to our turn, we're able to use whatever Ravemon we feel like we want to use. Then on top of that, this has an on-delete ability to pair up with the fact that he is going to be deleting himself, where we get to play a Falcomon or Keenan from our hand or trash for free, having another way to be able to help set up our secondary body to be able to do various different things, or our Tamer for when we need to try to go into our burst mode. And then the main level 6 of the deck is going to be 4 copies of the EX4 version of Ravemon. So this is just the better Ravemon for us to want to go into, just because of how much stronger of a card this is. Even though it's a little bit weaker in terms of the DP department, the fact that it's a cheaper evolution cost means that we're going to be more memory efficient, on top of the fact that its DP actually doesn't matter because he comes built in with the jamming ability, making his attacks into the opponent's security relatively safe. Then, on top of that, at the end of the attack, we get to delete this Digimon as long as it has a Digivolution source with a bird in one of its traits. And at the end of the opponent's turn, we get to play out a Ravemon from our trash for free. Again, having that same style of ability to be able to have him delete himself, hide in our trash, and then get played at the opponent's turn. So that way, he's going to be good to go on our turn when we're going to be aggressing again. Then, on top of that, he himself has another on-delete ability that we're trying to pair up with all of our other on-delete abilities because, again, he is going to be deleting himself, where if the opponent has 8 or more cards in their hand, then they get to trash 1 card from their hand, and then if they have 7 or fewer cards in their hand, then they get to add the top card of their security stack back into their hand. So we're basically just trying to make the opponent discard as many cards as we possibly can, and then if they don't have a specific hand threshold, then we get to put cards from their security, essentially burning them, into their hand, so that way we could try to have them discard it. And then as far as the level 7 of the deck goes, I'm only going to be running 3 copies of Ravemon Burst Mode. So the fact that our level 6s are going to be able to revive themselves allows us to have easy access at setting up our Burst Mode. Just because Burst Mode allows us to Digivolve on top of a Ravemon for free by returning a Keenan from our battle area back into our hand. Or if we really wanted to, we could just Digivolve and pay the cost to be able to get up into this card. But regardless, the fact that its when Digivolving ability allows us to do something we haven't really seen in the game, and that's actually have information on what's in the opponent's hand, because we get to search the opponent's hand for a card and trash it for the opponent. So we could try to look at their best card and try to pick it out to try to ruin their strategy as best as we possibly can. Then if the opponent has 7 or fewer cards in their hand, then the opponent adds the top card of their security stack back into their hand. So again, we're trying to burn the opponent's security, fill up their hand, so that way we could try to have ways to be able to make them discard their cards. Then on top of that, he even has a nice when attacking ability, where we get to return 1 Digimon card from the opponent's trash to the bottom of their deck to delete all of the opponent's Digimon with the same name as that card, so it really punishes the opponent for having lots of Digimon cards with the same name. Next, on to the Tamers, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Keenan. So this is the BT13 version of Keenan, and this is a really fantastic card for this deck because its on-play ability either forces the opponent to discard a card from their hand, more specifically a Tamer or option, and then if they don't, then that allows us to be able to gain a memory and draw a card, having access at more resources, while setting up our Keenan for a potential burst mode. Then it also has a nice secondary ability that interacts more specifically with how our Ravemons want to work on being able to replay themselves at the end of the opponent's turn, because while this card is on the field at the end of the opponent's turn, when in effect plays a Digimon, then we get to suspend this Tamer to be able to gain a memory, allowing us to have more memory generation. And then the last Tamer of the deck is going to be 3 copies of the EX4 version of Keenan. So the EX4 version of Keenan, yes, is another Keenan, because we do have cards that want to specifically interact with our Keenan, but on top of that, it's going to be the deck's dedicated memory fixing Tamer, so we can make sure our plays are going to be as effective as we possibly can, always starting at least 3 memory. Then on top of that, he even has a nice all turns ability for us to take advantage of, where when one of our purple Digimon with Ravemon in its name or a bird or avian in its traits is deleted, which our Ravemon wants to do himself, then we can suspend this Tamer to be able to draw a card, and if that Digimon was deleted by a card effect, then we also get to gain 1 memory. So this doesn't just work for us deleting our cards, it also works for the opponent also deleting our cards as well, making it just another pretty solid Tamer for us to use. And then as far as the options go, I'm running a very simple yet effective option lineup. I'm just going to be running 1 Calling from the Darkness because we're only able to run 1 of this card, but this card is still good because it interacts with a lot of our on-delete based synergies, because we get to delete a Digimon on our field, and then we get to return up to 2 purple Digimons from our trash back into our hand. The cool thing about this card is if we don't have any Digimon on the field, we can still use it to add 2 purple cards back into our hand. But mostly what we're trying to use this card for is that ability to have a cheap way to be able to delete our own Digimon. We do have to be careful with the fact that the Digimon's on-delete abilities are triggering from the trash, so you might not want to be grabbing back the card that you're going to be deleting using this ability. But as far as the main option for the deck and one of the most important cards in the entire deck, that's going to be 4 copies of Amino Obari. So this is a very strong option just because it's another card that's helping us delete our Digimon, so that way we could trigger all of our on-delete abilities. But as well as deleting one of our Digimon, we also get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon whose level is equal to or less than the Digimon that we just deleted. So ideally we're going to try to delete our Ravemon as an alternative way to be able to delete our Ravemon to trigger its abilities, all of the on-delete abilities that it's paired up with, and to be able to control the opponent's field all at the same time, especially with the fact that this card rewards us for having and using our Ravemons, where if one of the Digimon was a Ravemon that was deleted by this effect, then until the end of the opponent's turn, we also get to play a Ravemon from our trash for free, so it's just another way to be able to make sure our Ravemons are going to be as efficient and effective as we can possibly make them. Then it's also just a pretty decent security threat, where it just allows us to be able to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with the lowest level outright. And then as far as the overall game plan and gameplay of the deck, it really isn't the hardest deck in the world just because we have a lot of redundant effects that we're going to try to take advantage of. So when it comes to the usage of our level 3s, it really doesn't matter which level 3 we're using as long as we just have a level 3 in our raising area to be able to go off with. I think that the searching or digging Falcomon is going to obviously be the best one that we want to hard play, just so we could try to gain the searching ability off, but the fact that we have the consistency on that on-delete ability between our Falcomons means that it really doesn't matter which one we're utilizing, but if we do feel like we just need the extra memory, then Tsukaimon is still just one of the best ones, so that way we could not necessarily try to focus so hard on picking the opponent's hand apart and focus a little bit more on making sure we're going to be gaining lots of resources when our Digimon is going to get deleted. So you do kind of have to evaluate what type of stack you're going to try to build in terms of the types of abilities that you're trying to pair up with. I think the deck naturally just wants us to try to pick the opponent's hand apart, so that's just the direction that I'll show off in this example, just because we are trying to pick apart the opponent's hand to put them in a particular hand threshold for some specific abilities to try to be as effective as we can make it. So when it comes to the level 4 Digimon, we're in another similar camp or vein where we're going to try to use our Searcher or Digger to set up our secondary stack, and that's kind of where we could just do whatever we want with. Devidramon is obviously going to be a really good one in the raising area, similarly to how Tsukai is, but as far as what's on our second stack, it really doesn't matter if we're going to be utilizing the blocker or the ability to set up one of our tamers. I think that obviously on our secondary stack, setting up our tamer as quickly and effectively as we possibly can is going to be ideal, so we could try to gain some benefit off of what our tamers are going to be doing. But again, because the Peckmons have that same inheritable ability, it reasonably doesn't matter which one we're going to end up using. So for this example, I'm just going to continue to try to pick apart at the opponent's hand. Then when it comes to the level 5s, it really doesn't matter again here, which is kind of nice because we don't necessarily need to worry about trying to build this super perfect stack with some very specific abilities, just because we're playing all with very similar style of abilities. I do kind of like the new Crowmon in the late stages of the game, just because it's allowing us to digivolve from our trash, but in the early stages of the game, I think that the EX4 Crowmon works just fine, but again, it doesn't necessarily matter because we're still just trying to utilize the fact that A, they're a Crowmon, and B, we want to digivolve mid-attack. So for this example, I do want to play more towards the early stages of the game when the opponent's hand isn't super set up or developed, so we could try to disrupt them as best as we possibly can. So taking the more proactive approach, I'm going to be wanting to use the EX4 Crowmon, especially since I'm not trying to fill up my trash with Ravemons all that often, and I don't have a lot of ways to be able to set that up. So from this type of a position, we have two options available to us. We could either digivolve in our raising area because, again, it doesn't realistically matter, but most of the time what I found myself doing is just moving out, being able to swing with my Crowmon, and then utilize Crowmon to digivolve into our Ravemon. It doesn't necessarily matter which Ravemon we're digivolving into, just because we will be able to get both of their abilities off. The jamming and end of attack ability is is the safer option between the two, so that way we're guaranteed to be able to get the fact that we're trying to delete our Digimon off, and then when our Digimon gets deleted, we get to trigger all of our on-delete effects to gain a memory, make the opponent discard 2 cards from their hand, on top of the fact that we could then delete a level 5 or lower Digimon, which may or may not matter depending on the current state of the game. But the fact that we want to try to pick the opponent's hand apart incentivizes his on-delete ability, so that way when the opponent has, after his discard, 7 or fewer cards, we get to then burn an opponent's security, so that way we essentially have dealt 2 damage utilizing this Ravemon. Then he's going to pop himself, go to the trash, and then from there we get to be able to replay a Ravemon from our trash, which most likely is going to be the one that we just deleted at the end of the opponent's turn, so that way we could then be able to line up our burst mode play by bouncing whatever Keenan that we have set up to be able to then get his When Digivolving ability off to continue to try to pick the opponent's hand and security apart. And that's kind of just the core concept of what this deck is trying to do, is just try to pick the opponent's hand apart so we could try to make our Ravemon and our burst mode as effective as we possibly can. And this is kind of where it doesn't matter which of the Ravemons that we're using. I think that the BT13 one is fine. It's not insane, but the on-delete ability does help us be able to set up our play to be able to line up a burst mode when our Digimon gets deleted. But regardless, this is kind of where off of either of our Ravemons, the option card that he's going to be playing with is super important to be able to delete a Ravemon and to be able to replay a Ravemon while being able to delete one of the opponent's Digimon, because I don't know if you noticed, but on a lot of the abilities outside of our burst mode, we don't have the effectiveness to be able to deal with anything level 6 or higher, which the option card shores up that weakness quite nicely. So that's kind of just the whole give and take, ebb and flow on what the deck is trying to accomplish. And then we do have a whole bunch of other tech and tools that we could think about incorporating into the deck, all depending on what cards you have access to, the expected meta you're going to be playing up against, and the type of abilities you want to be prioritizing. So we do have some other inheritable on-delete abilities that we could take advantage of for some various different levels. I'm just going to be highlighting Gabumon and Devimon as 2 really good alternatives. Then, speaking of on-delete based synergies, we do have Ignitemon to act as some more control, and his inheritable ability also is pretty decent when our Ravemons are going to be playing themselves for free if we have a secondary stack built up. Then on top of that, we do have Purple Floodgates, because both Gazimon and Psychmon are pretty good at being able to shut out and shut down a lot of potential strategies. Then if you're trying to take advantage of bird-based synergies, we do have Saberdramon as another level 4 bird, and we also could think about leaning into a little bit of some hybrids just to try to help squeak some extra damage in and have alternative ways at being able to utilize our tamers. Then our level 5s and our level 6s, we don't really need to play anything else, but we do have some alternative level 7s that we can incorporate into the deck, just because these are some really decent level 7s in the form of Death Exmon, just because we don't need to Digivolve on top of our Ravemons, so if the opponent just plays into it, then Death Exmon is still just a very powerful and solid card, on top of the fact that we do have Shine Greymon Ruin mode if we don't quite have our burst mode, but still want to gain as much value off of our Ravemon coming back from the trash as we possibly can. Then on top of that, we do have just some decent option cards for added utility, like Purple Memory Boost for some extra consistency along with some other memory boosts. Then we do have some various other removal options and cards to try to help sacrifice our own Digimon to be able to trigger the abilities off ourselves. Then we do have just some other generic utility cards, like a couple of the different plugins to be able to do whatever we feel like we need the plugins to do. I like Offensive plugin just because the Security Attack Plus, paired up with the jamming, is really fun and allows us to help deal as much damage as we possibly can to try to close the game a little bit quicker. Then on top of that, we do have some other really solid tamers for us to use that are interacting with the whole sub-theme of deleting our own Digimon. So Alice McCoy is just allowing our evolution to be a little bit cheaper if we have a secondary stack built up. Then we also do have the starter deck Matt as a really cheap tamer to help us with just some extra memory generation when our Digimon are being deleted. Then on top of that, you could think about utilizing Analog Youth as another reward for when our Digimon are being deleted, with an added effect on top of being a decent consistency tool that also could help put cards into our trash. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.